Hi everyone, this is Jarrad, Victor Kilo 3 Bravo Lima, and today we're going to look at how to set up your receiver for optimal performance. Specifically, when you're using a direct sampling receiver, we're looking at when to use the preamp, when to use the attenuator, and how to set the RF gain for optimal performance. And the reason I'm making this video today is I got an email from one of our ham friends and viewers, John, and he's basically linked me to a report that Rob Sherwood from Sherwood Engineering, the famous antenna benchmark maintainer, and in that email, Rob Sherwood said basically, a lot of hams, or implied, a lot of hams aren't using or don't know how to use the RF gain and the attenuator properly on their radio. So John was sent me an email asking, well, what does Rob mean, and how do you set these things properly? So I said to John, well, I'll make a video covering that topic. So that's what we're looking at today. And I'm using the IC-7300 because it's quite simple. It's easy to demonstrate the functionality, and there's a lot of them out there. So, and the advice that I'll be showing you today applies to any radio really, but it's particularly important to modern direct sampling SDR radios, and it's also important to older boat anchors. If you want to get the best sound out of a boat anchor, follow these procedures. They're the same for all radios, but they're particularly important for SDRs and for boat anchors. So anyway, without much further ado, we'll start off. Now at the moment, I'm tuned to the 80 meter band, and we can see that there's no real signal. I'll just turn the volume up. There's nothing but band noise, and we're at about S7. Excuse me. So basically, what's happening now is because we've got such a strong signal, the band noise is probably triggering the AGC, and that's not a desirable situation. So what we want to do, for starters, we want to reduce the band noise, so reduce the gain on 80 meters on our receiver, so it's not triggering the AGC, and that will help with the received audio. But not only will it help with the received audio, it will also help with the dynamic range. By reducing, basically the gain of the received signal in the receiver, we're going to allow the receiver to hear more. So anyway, I'll show you how to do that. So there's two main ways of doing it. One, you can use your RF gain knob here, and we can just reduce it. You'll see RF gain comes on the radio, and we can bring it down to just tickling. It was a electrical crash of some sort. You can just reduce it to just when it's tickling S1. So that's quite a bit. Now, the other way you can do it, which is on this radio my preferred way for 80 meters, is to hold down the power amp button and attenuate, and turn the attenuator on. Now, as you can see, that's dropped it well below S1. Now, you might ask, have we completely squished the signal? It went from S7 to S1. How do we know we're still going to hear things? And the easiest way to do that, and I'll give you a demonstration, is to disconnect the antenna. So I'll turn the volume right up. Now we'll disconnect the antenna. I might need to turn that up a bit more. One, you can see that the scope's dropped off. But two, when I plug the antenna back in, you should hear that it's noticeably louder. So hopefully you just heard that it was noticeably louder, and we've got stuff back on our scope. Now that tells us that there's still sufficient gain in our receiver, that the antenna is defining the noise floor, not the receiver's internal components. So that's one way of testing, have I put too much attenuation or RF gain reduction on, is to just quickly disconnect the antenna and plug it back in. If there's a change, if there's more noise when you've got an antenna plugged in, then you've got enough RF gain. It's as simple as that. So yeah, I normally leave the attenuator on for 80 meters, as do quite a few people who've got decent sized antennas. If you've only got a small antenna, or like a 20-foot vertical or something, you might not need to use the attenuator on 80. But if you've got something like a G5RV or a full-size dipole for 80, you almost certainly will need to use the attenuator if you want the best performance. Otherwise, you'll have your band noise triggering your AGC and things won't sound as nice. So anyway, I'll leave the attenuator on. Let's go back to 40 meters. Now I'll just quickly tune. My auto tune is just tuning up now. And we'll just do a fine tune. There we go. With the SSB. So if we go to a spare spot on the band, we can see we've got about S3 of noise. Now that's not much. With this radio, if I turn the attenuator on, I'll drop it down way too much. So I don't want to use the attenuator on 40 meters. I'll just use my RF gain knob. You'll see it's activated, and we'll bring it down so it's just tickling about S1. There's quite a bit of impulse noise on the band at the moment, which is a little bit annoying, but that's just 40 meters for you. So let's have a listen to that signal if we can.
Yeah, 5x9, a great signal, Roy. Over. Yeah, okay, Colin, from Tower Hill, and thanks very much for the nice report. Well, I haven't got any preamp on switched on at the moment, and you're 5 and 7. I'm sure if I switch the preamp on, it will take you over S9. But the band's a bit noisy, so I thought I wouldn't make it any worse. And,
there you go, that was interesting. He was actually talking about the preamp and how having it on when it's not needed can make things worse, which is exactly right. So one thing you'll notice is he's just over S9. Now, when I reduce the RF gain, one unfortunate side effect on this radio is it does distort the S meter readings. If we go back to normal or no RF gain reduction, you can see the station's actually probably about 10 over 9, almost to 15 over 9. So it does impact, using the attenuator, the preamp and the RF gain, does impact the reading on the S meter. And I think that's why, I personally feel that's why a lot of hams don't like to use them, because they want to be able to give an accurate S meter report. But that's actually quite a silly reason not to use them, because if you think about it, we're in the game of communicating. We're not in the measurement or the instrumentation game. The whole idea of ham radio is to self-train in radio and to, have a bit of fun, pick up signals, receive them as best you can, all those sort of things. So if we worry too much about giving people, your 10 over and that sort of thing, we're not going to get the most out of our radios. So my suggestion is, when you've got a station like this one here, if they come back, that was really strong, you don't need to be able to say exactly, you're 20 over 9. A 5 and 9 will suffice. The fact of the matter is, his audio is easily copyable, and, we know his signal's quite strong. So that's really what it's about. I wouldn't personally worry about, giving a completely accurate report, especially on bands that fade so quickly. I'd be more interested in receiving the other party's signal as best as I can, and that's where adjusting the RF gain using the attenuator can come in handy so much. So, the only other feature I sort of want to give a demonstration of, we'll go up here, is the notch function and auto-notching. It caused a lot of controversy when Scott and I mentioned that we missed having the notch function. on the IC-7610. But I'll show you why it's so useful. Just pretend there's some really rare DX station transmitting down in the noise on 7150. And we're trying to pick them up. And all of a sudden, some lid decides that in order to work the DX station, the best thing they can do is tune up exactly on his frequency. And they decide to do it exactly when the DX station is coming back to us. And we don't know whether he's made our call out or not. So this is what the Knotch function does. Here's the lid and dropping his carrier. And you know, it's completely stopping our ability to hear that rare DX. Now one press of this button and the lid's gone. He's free to transmit his carrier as many times as he likes, and it's not going to stop us hearing that rare DX. So that's why I like the one-touch Knotch function of the IC-7300 and why I wish the 7610 had it. But it doesn't, and that's life. Now if we go to, and I'll show you one more band, if we go to 20 meters, and we'll just tune up again because we have to. Now I'll put the RF gain back to normal. Okay, so if we look at 20 meters, once again our band noise is about, in my case at the moment, it's about S2. Now that's not a huge deal, but we're not going to want to use the attenuator because that really takes a lot off. Now, if we turn the preamp on, all we're doing is increasing the amount of the noise floor to the point that it can start triggering our AGC. So we definitely don't want to use the preamp. It's not going to help us get a rare station. If your noise is tickling your S meter, just tickling it, you've got enough gain. It's as simple as that. So on 20 meters, I don't run an attenuator. I don't run a preamp. What I do though is sometimes, if needed, I'll roll the RF gain back a little bit just so it's not triggering my AGC. And that's really all you need to do. The RF gain is your friend. It's going to stop the band noise from pumping your AGC, and it's going to allow you to hear more because you're going to have a better dynamic range. You know, essentially what it's doing, just say this is 60 over and this is S9. If this is noise and you reduce the RF gain, you're actually expanding the dynamic range of what your receiver can hear. Now these guys top out at about 100 decibels wide spaced with IP plus turned on, which is more than the human ear can actually hear in terms of dynamic range. So there's a lot of dynamic range in these radios, but there's no point having your band noise all the way up here and only having this usable when your receiver can do all of this with just the turn of a knob. So use the RF gain, use the attenuator. They're your friends. Keep your keep your band noise down around S1 or slightly lower. And if you are worried that you're missing out on a weak signal, just do this. Disconnect the antenna a sec, and then plug it back in. You can clearly tell that you're not actually missing anything. You're just making that range bigger. So that's my recommendation. Use the RF gain, use the attenuator. To keep it simple, I'll say it like this. If you've got something like a G5RV on 20 meters, you don't want to run any preamp, you don't want to run any attenuation. You might want to run a little bit of RF gain reduction, but only a tad. On 40 meters, you're going to want to run a decent amount of RF reduction during the day. At night, you may want to run the attenuator. On 80 meters, you're pretty much always going to want to run the attenuator and maybe even a little bit of additional RF gain reduction. Now, on different radios, you might have multiple attenuator steps. So, for instance, the IC-7610 by default can do 6, 12 and 18. It can also do expanded all the way up to 40. But this radio, the 7300, only has on and off. So in this case, on 80 and 60, you're just going to want to run the attenuator and a bit of reduction. Now, on 50 meters, and I won't tune up here, but 50 meters is actually quite quiet. You know, you've got no signal at all there. So that's when you might, and looking at the spectrum scope, I probably wouldn't, but you might run preamp 1. And so even by running preamp 1, I've only brought it up to about tickling S1. So that's when you use the preamp on the higher bands. But 20 and lower, it's always attenuator or RF gain reduction. Now, if I have a look at 21, 21 is another case of I've got RF gain at normal, it's not tickling the S meter, but you know, I can still make out some weird band noise and I can still see on the scope. So you could run the preamp and have a little bit of tickling, but it's not necessary. $10 meters, similar story. You know, with a G5RV sized antenna plugged in, you can still hear everything that you're going to want to hear. But you know, you've got your band noise isn't pumping the AGC, so that's a good thing. You could run preamp 1. It's not going to buy you anything. I generally leave them off. The less amplifiers you have in your signal chain, the better, you know, the less active devices, the better quality ultimately you're going to get. So if you need to use the preamp, you'll know it, but generally leave it off. So anyway, there you go. There's my video showing how to use the RF gain knob on your radio, how to use the attenuator, and when to use them and why to use them. I hope you found it useful, and I hope this sort of covers what you wanted to know, John. Please let me know if it doesn't. And yeah, as I said, yes, reducing the RF gain will change the S meter readings. But what is an S meter reading anyway? You know, there's a reason contesters just give out 5 and 9 all the time. It's because they're, you know, to pick your weak station up, they might have chucked on heaps of preamp, or they might have used this or that. The thing is, it's not like we all have a single reference antenna that gives us a golden standard of, you know, how loud someone is. If someone's got a beam pointed at you, they're going to give you a better estimator reading than someone with a vertical. That's just the way it is. So in that regard, I think, you know, as hams, we're not in the game of measurement and instrumentation. We're in the game of radio communication, and I strongly advise not worrying about S meter readings and that sort of thing, and worrying about getting the best audio quality you can and the best copy, which is by using the RF gain, and not worrying about that, you know, the fact that it slightly changes your S meter. Just make up for it. If someone's, you know, if you put the RF gain on and someone's a 5 and 5, you know, they're probably 5 and 7, you know, that sort of thing. Play around, experiment. Don't worry about it. Use it. Get the best copy out of your radio. Anyway, I hope this has made sense. I hope it's inspired some people to not worry so much about giving the signal report with, you know, no preamp and no attenuator and no RF gain changes. And yeah, and I hope it's inspired hams to get the most out of their receiver. You'll be surprised what you can do with RF gain and a little bit of reduction on both SDR radios and especially boat anchors. When you're using something like an FT-101 Echo, changing the RF gain can make such a huge difference to the audio copy. It's it's absolutely phenomenal. So anyway, I'm rambling on now. You'll have to excuse me. I did a lot of physical work yesterday, and I'm in a bit of pain. I was doing data cabling. Anyway, 73 from Jarrad VK3BL, and yeah, please put in your comments what you think of the video, what you think of the advice, any mistakes I've made, and you know, whether it's inspired you to play around with your 7300 or your 7610 or whatever radio you have. Catch you later, guys. Yeah, 73 as always from Jarrad VK3BL.